Alright, and welcome to Fractions Level 2. Now, what's our rule for dividing fractions? Well, I always like to say this. I like to say KCF. Well, it's almost like KFC, but just a little flipped. And so we have, what's the K stand for? Well, that's going to stand for keep. And the C is going to stand for change. And the F is going to stand for flip. Now, the more technical way, in case you want to get real fancy, is we actually call this multiplying by the, fancy word time, reciprocal. That kind of sounded out for you guys, but multiplying by the reciprocal. Okay, so what does this look like in practice? By the way, guys, up at the top where it says room for notes or space for notes, please go ahead and write this down. Okay, for our first example, we have 2 over 3 divided by 5 6. Now let's go ahead and write KCF across the top. And so what does the K stand for? Keep. We are going to keep 2 over 3 the exact same. What does the C stand for? Change. We're going to change our division sign to a multiplication symbol. And flip, well, think about it like this. We're going to take what's on the bottom and bring it to the top, and what's on the top and bring it to the bottom. So if I flip 5 over 6, I get 6 over 5. And now we're back to multiplying fractions. I do top times top. 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 times 5 is 15. And wait a second, if I'm pretty good with numbers, I notice that 12 and 15 can both be divided by 3. And so 12 divided by 3 is, of course, 4, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. And here is my reduced answer, 4/5. All right, let's move on to our second example. Okay, for example number 2, we have negative 3/8 divided by 1/7. And so we can write negative 3 over 8. Remember, we're going to keep it. But here I want to use that other rule. Remember my fancy rule? It's called multiplying, kind of abbreviate, multiplying by the reciprocal. And guys, multiplying by the reciprocal, all this means is that you flip the fraction. So if I were to say, hey, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal of 1 over 7, the reciprocal is 7 over 1. That's just flipping the fraction. Here on top, I have negative 3 times 7, which is negative 21 over, and on the bottom, 8 times 1 is 8. And of course, that cannot reduce. Let's look at example number 3. We have negative 7 over 5 divided by negative 2. So we keep the negative 7 over 5 the same. We change our division to multiplication, but wait a second. We're not dividing by a fraction, we're dividing by a whole number. Recall, we want to divide negative 2 by the number 1 to turn it into a fraction. And so the reciprocal of negative 2 over 1 is negative 1 over 2. Some students get confused here. You have to keep the sign the same. And so we have negative 7 over 5 times negative 1 over 2. Well, a negative times a negative is a positive, and on top 7 times 1 is 7 over 5 times 2 is 10. Our answer is 7 over 10. Now notice I did not include the plus sign inside the box because from this point forward, whenever I say a negative times a negative is a positive, we always assume numbers are positive, so you actually don't even need to write that out. All right, let's go on to example number 4. All right, here we have example 4, 5, and 6. Now this way, I'm going to kind of work to the right, so we keep our x over 5. However, we change our division to multiplication, and the reciprocal of 3 over 5 is 5 over 3. And here we have x times 5. On top, 5x over 5 times 3, 15. But notice something. 5 over 15, they can both be divided by 5. So we'd say we reduce it by 5. We can write this as 1 over 3x. All right, because 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. Okay, let's take a look at example number 5. I keep my negative 6 over 11 the same. I change my division to multiplication. And wait a second, what is the reciprocal of 5y over 2? Well, that's going to be 2 over 5y. And this is weird. Now our variable is in the denominator, and that's okay. So here we have negative 6 times 2 on the top will be negative 12 over. And wait a second, what's 11 times 5? Of course, that will be 55 y. I don't believe these have any common factors, so let's just go ahead and leave this like this. Now, one note, you cannot pull the y out of the denominator. So we have to very clearly here leave the y on bottom. We can't pull it to the right like we did in example number 4. Okay, here's our last and final example. We have negative 8z divided by negative 2/5. And recall, we take whole numbers, or in this case, we take whole terms, or whole variables, and we can put the whole thing over 1. And so what do we really have? We have negative 8z over 1 times negative 5 over 2. We know that two negatives make a positive, and 8z times negative 5, or I'm sorry, 8z times 5 would be 40z over 1 times 2 is 2. And wait a second, what is 40 divided by 2? Well, that would give us 20z as our final answer. And that's our reduced form. All right, thank you all so much, and I'll see y'all in our level 3 video.